Hi everyone, thanks for coming to this video. I'm going to be talking about pluralities, counterparts, and groups. In particular, I'm going to be giving a metaphysical theory of what groups are. That'll come with some existence conditions, identity conditions, group membership conditions, and subgroup conditions for groups. And then I'm going to supplement that metaphysical account with an account of the semantics of temporal and modal sentences about groups. So this project is somewhat related to another project I have about groups where I propose a different kind of an account of what a group is. It's in a paper forthcoming in AJP. In that paper, I analyze groups in terms of fusions of pluralities. And I use that analysis to satisfy a bunch of desiderata that people have for a theory of groups. In this paper, in this presentation at least, my goals are a little bit different. As I will show throughout the talk, I do end up satisfying, or this theory does end up satisfying, a bunch of desiderata that people have for theories of groups. The main initial motivation, anyway, for the theory is slightly different, however. The initial motivation is the question, to what extent could an analysis of groups be similar to an analysis of material objects? In particular, part of what motivated the development of this project was I wanted to know whether groups could be analyzed along the kind of lines that objects have been analyzed along. And I think that they can, and I think that that's interesting. I think the analysis I will provide does a good job of sticking to a particular analysis of material objects while departing from it in the ways that an account of groups should depart from such an analysis. And part of the interest of this project is just seeing a little bit more clearly how closely related these two types of items, groups and objects, material objects, are. So the account of material objects that the account of groups that I'm going to explore here most closely mimics is a stage theoretic account of material objects mentioned by Lewis and discussed and I think endorsed by Ted Sider. The stage theoretic account of material objects says that a material object is like an instantaneous time slice of a thing. So I'm Isaac. Isaac, that name denotes an instantaneous time slice of the four-dimensional space-time worm that we might associate with my whole self over my whole life. But still, what I am is this instantaneous sort of object. The account of groups that I'm going to explore here says something very similar. Basically what it says is a group is an instantaneous plurality of entities. Or it'll be a little bit more complicated than that. But that's the like first pass statement of what the view is. And then to satisfy various modal and temporal, to get various desiderata for the theory of groups, I supplement this kind of stage theoretic-like theory with a bunch of truth conditions for how we should understand claims about like the groups, like this group used to be this way, this group will be this way, this group could have been this way, stuff like that. So that's where the counterpart theory comes in. Okay, so let me start with the metaphysics, the metaphysical half of this total of this complete theory of groups, this reasonably complete theory of groups, and then I'll do the semantics. So give a semantics for modal and tense statements about groups. So the metaphysical. What groups are, what their identity conditions are, what group membership is, and what the subgroup relation is. To give all these conditions, I'm going to need some preparatory notions. So the most basic one is just a plurality. What is a plurality? Well, a plurality you could think of to a first approximation as the referent of a plural term. A plural term might be a term like the U.S. Supreme Court justices. That's a plural term. Its referent is a plurality, a bunch, to use as neutral a word as I can think of justices kind of taken together. Pluralities are not themselves entities, and that's a very important thing to keep in mind. pluralities, so people think that being ontologically committed to pluralities is not being ontologically committed to some further entity over and above the entities which are members of the plurality. Rather, a plurality you can think of as plural terms are just offer another kind of grammatical, linguistic way of referring to the entities to which you're already ontologically committed. So that, in rough outline, is what a plurality is. Unfortunately, to give an account of groups that doesn't fall prey to certain obvious problems, I'm going to have to appeal to more than just pluralities. I'm going to have to appeal to a richer set of plural notions than just the notion of a plurality and the members of the plurality. So I'm going to have to appeal to pluralities of pluralities. So those are, you can understand those to a first approximation as the reference of plurally plural or super plural terms. Super plural is Rayo's term for that kind of thing. So for example, the faculty committees, that expression might plausibly be understood as a super plurally plural term. It refers to this plurality of pluralities, the plurality of all the faculty committees. What are the members of that plurality of pluralities? They're the faculty committees. But just as, to be clear, just as pluralities are not entities, so super pluralities, as I'll call them from now on, are not pluralities. So calling them pluralities of pluralities is like sort of quick and loose way to describe what's going on. Super pluralities are just represent a kind of different way of referring to that to which we were already ontologically committed. The pluralities, which themselves represent nothing really over and above those entities which are their members. So to give the existence condition for groups, I'm going to have to appeal to the notion of a super plurality as well as a plurality. And I'll have to appeal to the notion of a super plurality and a super plurality, and so on, up this kind of infinite hierarchy of more and more pluralish sorts of terms. So for each n natural number greater than 0, say that an n plurality is a super super plurality, where the term super is repeated n times. And say that a 0 plurality, from now on, by 0 plurality, I'll mean a plurality. That is, from now on, when I talk about pluralities, I'll say 0 pluralities to distinguish them from super pluralities, super pluralities, and so on. And I'll call super pluralities 1 pluralities, super pluralities 2 pluralities, and so on. And then I'll say that X is a Pn member of Y, just in case Y is an n plurality which contains X. So Ginsburg is a P0 member of the Supreme Court Justices. Why? Because the Supreme Court Justices are a 0 plurality, and they contain Ginsburg as a member. Okay, with all that preparation in the background, let's give the existence condition for groups. Let T be a time. Then according to existence, I'll call it the existence condition, X sub T is a group if and only if for some natural number n, X sub T is an n plurality at that time. In other words, groups are instantaneous n pluralities. So take the U.S. Supreme Court at the present time. That instantaneous 0 plurality, that instantaneous bunch of justices, is a group by this account. Or take the faculty committees for some local college at the present time. That collection is, or that bunch is a 1 plurality of pluralities at the present time, and so by this existence condition, it too is a group. Okay, group membership. Here's the membership condition. Let T be a time and let Xt be a group. So Xt is just for some n. Xt is an n plurality at T. Then E is a member of Xt if and only if for some n, E is a Pn member of Xt. So this all sounds very technical, but intuitively, it's pretty straightforward. What is a group? A group is just an n plurality, meaning at a particular time, meaning a group is just a bunch of entities, pluralities, super pluralities, and so on, like restricted to a particular moment. And what is group membership? Well, group membership is just plural membership. To be a member of a group is to be a member of the corresponding plurality, or to be a super plural member of the corresponding super plurality, or whatever. Okay, that was a lot. With that as a basis, though, the rest of the theory of groups becomes pretty manageable, not too hard to state. So the identity for condition for groups is pretty straightforward. Let's say we have times t and t prime, x sub t and y sub t prime are groups. Under what conditions is x sub t identical to y sub t prime? Well, just in case t is t prime, every member of xt is a member of y sub t prime, and every member of y sub t prime is a member of x sub t. In other words, groups x and y are identical just in case they are the same plurality, so they have the same n pluralities, they have the same pn members at the same time. That's all identity is for groups. What's the subgroup condition? What does it take for one group to be a subgroup of another? Well, it's about what you would expect. It's for all the members of the first to be members of the second. So again, you've got x sub t group at a time t, y sub t prime group at time t prime. X sub t is a subgroup of y sub t prime, just in case t is t prime, they're the same time, and every member of x sub t is a member of y sub t prime. So that is the subgroup condition. Those are all the conditions for the metaphysics of groups. And it turns out that those have a lot of really nice features. For example, those conditions imply that any arbitrary collection of entities makes for a group. For reasons argued in my other paper on groups in AJP, I think that's a really good thing for a theory of groups to imply. So I take this to be an advantage of this plural-based theory of groups that I'm exploring here. The theory I'm exploring here implies that there are groups of groups. A group of groups is, for example, a one plurality of zero pluralities. The theory I'm exploring here implies that groups are not sui generis entities. That is, groups are not anything. To be ontologically committed to groups isn't to be ontologically committed to anything over and above the things to which we were already ontologically committed. This is a desiderata for a theory of groups that Nick Effingham, apologies if I'm mispronouncing something, endorses, and I like. And it's a desiderata that I don't think my other account meets. This account implies that some groups are spatiotemporal. A desiderata discussed by Kate Ritchie. Which groups are spatiotemporal? Well, the ones whose members are spatiotemporal. The U.S. Supreme Court justices. That group is spatiotemporal because the justices are space-time things. This account of groups implies that the group membership relation is not transitive. I won't walk through that here for lack of time, but the basic idea is just because you can have, for example, an entity that's a P0 member of a zero plurality. That zero plurality can then be a P1 member of a super plurality, a one plurality, and yet that entity could fail to be a member of the super plurality, that one plurality. And so that's how, because of that, the group membership relation is not transitive. Now, like the stage theory of Ted Snyder's stage theory of material objects, this stage theory of groups might seem to have some really bad implications. It might seem to imply that groups can only exist at one time. It might seem to imply that groups can't change their members over time. It might seem to imply that groups are world-bound, meaning it's not possible for a group to be otherwise. Moving on to the semantic half of my theory of groups, in this presentation, I can now show that none of that is the case. By adopting a counterpart theoretic semantics for modal and temporal sentences about groups, we can get out of all of those sorts of problems. Again, for lack of time, trying to keep this to definitely less than 20 minutes and as close to 15 as possible, I won't go into the details. I won't go into the details of counterpart theory, but very roughly put, you get these desiderata in exactly the same way you would get kind of parallel desiderata for the stage theory of material objects. A sentence like group X sub T could have been such that phi, that sentence, is true at a time and a context, if and only if there is a possible world which contains a counterpart of that group X sub T relative to that context, and that counterpart is such that phi. Neil, wait, man, I might get this wrong. Neil Gorsuch could have been a member of the U.S. Supreme Court. That's true, even if U.S. Supreme Court picks out the present zero plurality of justices. Why? Well, because that present zero plurality has a counterpart in another possible world, such that a counterpart of Neil Gorsuch is a member of that other plurality of entities, that other group. The same sort of move, but using temporal counterparts at earlier and later points in time, can be used to give a satisfying semantics for statements about how groups used to be, how they will be, how groups change over time, that sort of stuff. So, for example, the sentence xt was such that phi, that's true at a time and a context. Just in case at some time earlier than t, there is a temporal counterpart of x sub t, determined by the context c, and that temporal counterpart is such that phi. So Scalia was a member of the U.S. Supreme Court. That's true, even though U.S. Supreme Court picks out the present time slice, present plurality of justices. Why? Why is that true? Well, because that present plurality has a temporal counterpart in the past, such that Scalia is, in a tensile sense of is, a member of that past temporal counterpart. That point about it being a tensile sense of is very important. I won't go into the details of that here for lack of time, though. Okay. And you can, of course, formulate similar conditions for temporal sentences about the future and temporal sentences about the present, where they're saying things about how groups are, so they're using is, these temporal sentences about the present, but the sentences are still tensed, so it is still appropriate to use a temporal counterpart theoretic semantics to interpret them. Okay, the last big thing that I want to mention this theory of groups gets, and for lack of time I can't go into the details, but I will just point the interested parties to Art Corex, apologies if I'm getting that wrong, field review paper on counter-identicals. The last part of this semantic theory of groups is a condition that gives us semantics for claims of the form group A is distinct from group B. Now, the reason I have a complicated semantics for those sorts of English language sentences is because I want to be able to say that certain claims about groups being distinct made in natural language are true, even though the terms used to refer to those groups are actually referring to one and the same plurality. And so in the object language, let's say, of the metaphysics of groups theory, strictly speaking, the groups referred to by A and B are identical. So this additional condition gives a counterpart theoretic interpretation of what's going on there that uses multiple counterpart relations to get the truth conditions right for statements like the chess club could have been distinct, or just the chess club is distinct from the knitting club, even when those the chess club term and the knitting club term refer to one and the same zero plurality. You can still get the English language sentence to have the right truth conditions, even though in the rigorous metaphysical language in which the theory of groups is being formulated, that the sentence the chess club is identical to the knitting club is in fact true. Okay, so that's the plural counterpart theory of groups. It comes with these existence, membership, identity, subgroup conditions for the metaphysics of groups, and then these conditions for the semantics of groups, for temporal and modal claims about groups. It has a bunch of other nice features besides the ones I just mentioned. It implies that some groups have their members contingently or temporarily, or that some groups exist but some but not all worlds, some groups exist at some but not all times. It implies that distinct groups can sometimes coincide, and it does all that by this complicated counterpart theoretic semantics for groups. Okay, if you're interested in seeing a draft of this paper, I would love to get comments, criticisms, anything. So please email me at isaac.wilhelm@rutgers.edu. I hope this was clear, and yeah, I hope people are interested in this account of what groups might be. Thanks.